Before we begin, if this story grips you from the very first line, hits you somewhere you didn't expect, or keeps you reading past the hour you meant to stop, please like, share, and leave a comment below. Stories like this one live and breathe because of you. Now, let's go. The fluorescent lights of Hospital Riviera Cancun had a particular cruelty at 2 in the morning. They stripped everything down to its truth, the tired hollows under nurses' eyes, the antiseptic smell that no arrangement of tropical flowers in the lobby could defeat, the silence that was not really silence, but the held breath of a building full of people waiting to find out whether someone they loved was going to be okay. Sofia Mendoza had been studying that quality of light for 11 months. She knew every flicker in the overhead tube of the East Corridor, every blind spot in the security camera by the vending machines, every variation in the sound the sliding glass entrance doors made depending on wind direction. Night shifts had a way of making you intimate with a building whether you wanted to be or not. She was updating intake files, her fingers moving without thought across the keyboard when the doors opened. Later, much later, she would think about that moment, the precise second before she looked up, the last second of not knowing. The doors slid apart with their familiar pneumatic sigh, and a gust of warm Cancun night moved through the lobby carrying salt and iodine, and something heavier than either. And then she raised her eyes, and he was already halfway across the lobby. The first thing Sofia noticed was his hands. Not the torn linen shirt, dark across the shoulders with salt water and something older than salt water. Not the raw sunburn stretched tight over gaunt cheekbones and the sharp ridge of his nose. Not even the small, pale child he carried pressed against his chest with a completeness of focus that made everything else about him, the expensive ruin of his clothes, the dangerous intensity radiating from his face, fall temporarily aside. It was his hands, scarred at the knuckles, split open along the palms and healing badly, in crooked overlapping lines that spoke of weeks of labor no manicure on earth was going to reverse. The hands of a man who had built something out of nothing, literally, with his bare hands, for a very long time. She was already standing before he reached the desk. "I need a doctor," not a request. A declaration issued by a voice calibrated over many years to expect rooms to rearrange themselves accordingly. Now, Sofia reached for the emergency protocol binder with one hand and the intercom with the other. "Sir, I'll need your—" "Did you hear me?" He stepped forward, and she received the full measure of his face, a jaw that hadn't decided between handsome and severe, dark eyes burning with exhaustion, and something raw and more dangerous underneath the exhaustion, a beard that had grown past the point of intention and kept going. "My daughter has not been conscious for 6 hours. I don't need forms. I need a physician in front of her in the next 90 seconds. Sofia did not step back. She had learned, in 11 months at this desk, and in the complicated years that preceded those 11 months, that stepping back was a language all its own. "I heard you clearly," she said. Her voice stayed even, unhurried. "And the fastest route to a physician is you answering 3 questions while I page the attending. Can you manage that?" He stared at her. She held it. The lobby hummed its empty hum. "Fine," he said. "Her name?" "Valeria Reyes. She's 8 years old." "Your name?" "Alejandro Reyes," she typed. The name touched something at the edge of her memory. A headline, a cover, something she'd seen in the waiting room a few months back in a business magazine she hadn't meant to read. She didn't reach for the memory. "How long has she been unresponsive?" 6 hours, possibly longer. His jaw worked. "I don't have my watch. We were on the water. I lost track of—" He stopped himself. 6 hours minimum. Sofia had already paged Dr. Fuentes and was coming around the desk with the wheelchair she'd quietly positioned the moment he'd walked through the door. She moved with the calm efficiency of someone who has stopped being surprised by urgency because urgency had become the weather, a permanent condition rather than an event. "Put her here, carefully." He placed the girl into the chair with a care so complete It transformed him. One moment he occupied the lobby like a pressure front. The next, he was nothing but attention and tenderness, directed entirely at this small, unconscious child. Valeria's face was pale beneath the fluorescent light. Her hair still salt-stiffened and tangled at the ends. Her lips cracked in the way of someone who had been thirsty for longer than a day. Even unconscious, she looked like she'd been fighting something, like the fighting had simply run out of room. Sophia guided the chair toward the triage corridor. "How long were you at sea?" She asked it neutrally. She was not prepared for his answer. 96 days. She stopped walking. She couldn't entirely help it. 96, she repeated. Yes. The word came out flat and absolute, a door shutting on something enormous. "Our yacht went down in a storm, 40 kilometers off Isla Mujeres. We made it onto a section of hull and reached a sandbar. Then the current moved us. We found other land. Then..." He exhaled, and in the exhale was the entire weight of 96 mornings. 96 days. "Doctor..." Fuentes appeared at the end of the corridor, young and efficient, already snapping on latex gloves. Alejandro moved toward him with the purposeful acceleration of someone who had classified Sophia's portion of this transaction as complete. She was infrastructure. He was finished with her. She watched him transfer his focus entirely to the physician. Watch the command drop out of his voice, replaced by something stripped and almost human, as he answered the attending's questions in a lower register. She watched Dr. Fuentes take Valeria's pulse, check pupil response, assess skin turgor. She watched him make the rapid, competent assessments of a good emergency physician who had seen dehydration and malnutrition before, and knew what they looked like. She was turning back toward the desk when she saw it. Valeria's right hand. The fingers moved, not the involuntary tremor of deep sleep, not a seizure pattern, not an artifact of being shifted into the wheelchair. A deliberate movement, brief, reaching, purposeful, gone in under a second. Sophia wrote it in the margin of her intake notes. Arhan, reaching motion, not reflex. Day 12. Ask. Then she went back to her desk and told herself it was probably nothing, and the night resumed its usual rhythm, and the words on the page looked back at her with the quiet persistence of things that refused to be nothing. The cafeteria at 4 in the morning had the specific desolation of spaces designed for function and occupied instead by exhaustion. Vending machines humming their low apology, plastic chairs under lighting that made everyone look convalescent. Sophia had eaten 215 meals here by her own imprecise count. She had stopped tasting them somewhere around meal 40. She found Alejandro Reyes at a corner table with an untouched paper cup of machine coffee and his hands flat on the plastic surface, staring at the middle distance with the expression of a man whose mind was somewhere the cafeteria overhead panels could not follow. She set a bottle of water in front of him and sat down across from him. It was not protocol. She did it anyway. He looked up. For a moment he seemed to place her. The desk, the intake, the corridor. "You're still here. My shift ends at 6. She nodded at the water. "Drink that before the coffee. Your electrolytes are in crisis." He picked up the bottle, turned it in his hands. "Dr. Fuentes says she's stable, dehydrated, malnourished. He wants a full panel at 7. "I know. I saw the orders." She folded her hands on the table. "She's going to be okay. People keep saying that." He wasn't sharp about it, just tired in a way that went well below sleep. "They say it because it's likely true." A pause. "The body is remarkably good at surviving things we think should finish it. We underestimate it constantly." He looked at her with those dark, exhausted eyes that had not lost, even now, their fundamental quality of assessment. "You don't talk like a receptionist. Receptionists are people. People talk differently. That's not what I mean." "I know what you mean," she said pleasantly, "and I mean what I said. She's stable, she's safe, she's here." A silence. He drank half the water without being told again. Set the bottle down. "She started getting headaches around day 12, he said, "not to anyone in particular." The statement drifted out of him like something he'd been holding for 3 months. "I thought it was the sun, then dehydration, Then I stopped knowing what to think, and I just started watching her more carefully. Sophia was very still. Day 12. Yes. Did the headaches change? Come and go? He looked at her. Something sharpened slightly behind the exhaustion. Yes, they cycled. 4 or 5 days of nothing, then they'd be back. I charted them on the hull, scratched the days into the fiberglass with a piece of metal. 23 documented episodes over 84 days. She breathed carefully. Did the timing of the episodes correlate with anything? Change in food source, water source, anything she ate or drank? The cafeteria hummed. A machine somewhere dispensed something into a cup for no one. You're not asking about intake protocol, he said. I'm the receptionist, she said. I ask about intake. That question wasn't about intake. He leaned forward slightly. In the harsh light, the lines on his face told the story of 3 months more legibly than any account he could have given. Why, day 12. She stood. Room 214, second floor supply room. Clean clothes. Tell them Sophia sent you and they won't ask questions. She picked up his untouched coffee and replaced it with the second water bottle she'd carried from her bag. Sleep if you can. She needs you functional in the morning. Sophia. She stopped. He said her name the way someone says a word they've just learned means something important. Why day 12? She turned back. He was watching her with the specific awakened attention of a person who has discovered that someone they dismissed contains rooms they have not been in yet. It was not attraction, not yet. It was something that preceded attraction and was, in some ways, more dangerous. It's probably nothing, she said. You don't believe that. She didn't. But she had learned the specific cost of speaking before certainty, and it was a cost she was not prepared to pay again. Sleep, Senor Reyes, she said, and left before he could say her name again. She spent the remaining hour of her shift at her desk with a notebook she carried from habit. The habit was a remnant of another life, a life in which she had been someone who noticed things clinically, who followed physiological anomalies with the patience of a person who believed the body always told the truth eventually, who understood that the body told it in a language that required training to read. She no longer had that training. Officially, she wrote day 12 on set. Cyclical, not continuous. 23 documented episodes, 84 days. Correlate W access variables. She wrote R-hand motion, reaching, purposeful, not reflex. She wrote 3 more things and underlined them twice and stared at the page. Outside, the Cancun sky was beginning its negotiation with dawn. The sea was audible in the distance. Not the gentle suggestion of waves, but the real thing, enormous and indifferent, the same water that had held Alejandro Reyes and his daughter for 96 days, and then, in whatever register the ocean holds, when it decides to let something go, release them. Sophia closed her notebook, put on her jacket, walked to the sliding glass doors, which opened to salt air and the last of the dark. She did not look back, but she thought about his hands the entire drive home, the way they'd placed his daughter in the wheelchair with a precision that was almost mathematical in its tenderness. The way they'd rested flat on the cafeteria table, healing and scarred, the hands of someone who had remade himself out of emergency. 96 days, day 12, 23 episodes in 84 days. She was not a doctor. She was very clearly, entirely and officially a receptionist, but she knew what she was looking at. And the knowledge sat in her chest with the specific weight of something that had been true for a long time and had simply been waiting for her to arrive at it. The morning shift at Hospital Riviera began at 7, and with it came the blood panel results for Valeria Reyes, and Alejandro Reyes standing in the corridor outside room 307, waiting for Sophia with the deliberate patience of a man who had decided that patience was a tactic. She saw him the moment she stepped off the elevator. He was in clean clothes from supply, a grey shirt and dark pants that fit him adequately rather than well, and he had slept, she gauged, approximately 3 hours, enough to change the quality of his exhaustion from critical to functional. He still looked like a man the ocean had held for 3 months and reconsidered. He was beginning to look like himself underneath that. She walked toward the nursing station. He fell into step beside her without asking. "Dr. Fuentes reviewed the panel," he said. "I know. I saw the flag. He says everything is within normal limits." He said essentially within normal limits. Sophia reached the station and pulled up the display. Dr. Fuentes had annotated the panel in green, the color of clinical satisfaction. She found the specific value she'd been thinking about since 4 that morning and looked at it without expression. There's a difference between within normal limits and essentially within normal limits. And the word essentially is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Alejandro was very still beside her. What does that mean? It means the number is technically inside the acceptable range. She kept her voice even, informational, the voice of someone reading administrative data. It means Dr. Fuentes has no clinical reason to flag it as a concern. It means that if you were a healthy adult who'd spent 3 months at sea and come in malnourished and dehydrated, this number would be entirely expected. But Valeria is 8. She looked up. And the number is sitting at the very floor of its range, not distributed the way you'd expect for a child her age, even under severe physiological stress. He held her gaze. "What are you looking at specifically?" She hesitated. Then she said, because his eyes had a quality of deserving the truth that she found difficult to argue with. "Acetylcholinesterase activity. It's an enzyme marker, technically within range. Sitting at the absolute bottom of that range in a pattern that could indicate 2 things. She paused. "Severe anemia is one of them. What's the other?" The nursing station computer hummed. Down the corridor, a monitor beeped its patient rhythmic reassurance. Sophia looked at him and said quietly and clearly, "Prolonged low-level exposure to organophosphate compounds." The word landed in the space between them and stayed there like weather. "Which are," he said, in a voice that had become very careful. "Widely used," she said, "in agriculture, pest control, certain industrial applications." She held his gaze. "Among other things." He stood absolutely still for 5 full seconds. Then, "You are not a receptionist." "I am completely a receptionist." Sophia, her name, the same quality as the night before, something stripped of performance. "Who are you?" "Nobody important," she said. "Not anymore." She closed the display. "Ask Dr. Fuentes to walk you through the acetylcholinesterase reading specifically. Don't frame it as a concern. Ask him to explain the value in context of her complete history, including the period before your trip." He didn't move. "What would I be looking for in the period before the trip? Changes in her baseline, episodes that could have been written off as something else." She picked up the folder she'd been carrying. "Headaches that started before the water." She watched him understand. Not the full architecture of it, not yet. But the first structural beam of it slid into place behind his eyes, and she saw the color of what followed. Something cold and precise, that was nothing like grief yet, but was the thing that came before grief, in a person who had not yet permitted themselves to feel it. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something in his face closed, not shut down, but managed, the way you manage a door in strong wind. "I have to take this." She nodded and turned. "Sophia." She looked back. He was already answering, but his eyes were on her. Dark and direct, and underneath everything, the exhaustion, the calculation, the thing that was not yet grief, unsettled in a way that had nothing to do with the call. "Thank you." She nodded and walked away, and did not let herself think about how her name sounded in his mouth until she was in the stairwell with the door closed behind her. Behind her, dimly through the door, she heard him say, "Camilla, yes, we're both fine. Where are you right now?" Valeria Reyes woke fully at 11:42 and was, Sophia discovered, devastatingly perceptive for an 8-year-old. Sophia had gone to deliver paperwork to the 3rd-floor nursing staff and found Alejandro in the hallway outside room 307, looking through the window glass with the expression of a man holding himself in place through an act of will. Inside, Valeria was awake and drawing with methodical concentration in a sketchbook one of the nurses had found for her. Her lines were careful and deliberate for a child. She drew the window frame, the IV stand, the abstract shape of a boat. She started drawing the moment she could hold objects, Alejandro said. He hadn't heard Sophia approach, or had heard her and decided not to react. Since she was 3, her teachers always said she had spatial intelligence, that she understood how things fit together. It shows, Sophia said. The drawing was precise in a way that most 8-year-olds' drawings were not, proportion considered. Her mother always said she'd be an architect, but he said it as a fact from another era, a silence. "Come meet her," he said. "That's outside my—" "Please." The word was a small, clean thing with a large cost behind it. She went in. Valeria looked up from her drawing with large, dark eyes that were completely his. Then she looked at the drawing, then back at Sophia, with the evaluative precision of a child who has spent 3 months learning that quick assessment is a survival skill. "Are you the lady from last night?" she asked. "Papa said you helped us get here." "I work at the front desk," Sophia said. "He said you helped us," Valeria repeated, with the absolute certainty of someone for whom the distinction between job function and moral reality was not particularly interesting. Sophia sat in the plastic chair by the bed. "What are you drawing?" "The rescue boat." Valeria's pencil moved with her quiet concentration. "It was yellow with blue letters on the side. I remember because those are good colors together." She glanced up. "What's your favorite color?" "Blue," Sophia said. "The specific blue the sea turns at about 5 in the morning, just before real light." Something moved in the girl's face. Recognition, maybe, or the closest thing to it. "We saw that color," she said softly. "We were awake for it sometimes. Papa used to wake me to watch." Her hand paused on the paper. "Before my head started hurting." Sophia kept her voice easy, conversational. The voice of someone asking a question that matters no more than any other question. "How long before the trip did your head start hurting?" Valeria considered this with the seriousness she applied to all genuine questions. "A little while," she said. "Not bad. Just there. Like someone put something heavy on the left side and walked away." She touched the left temple with 2 fingers, the same side Sophia had noted the previous night. "I told Papa. He said it was probably school stress." "That's usually what it is," Sophia said. "I know." A pause. But it wasn't that. The room was quiet. The monitor beeped. Down the hall somewhere, a phone rang twice and went unanswered. "Can I see your drawing?" Sophia asked. Valeria held it up. The yellow boat. The water rendered in careful parallel lines, a small figure at the bow, and in the lower right corner of the page, barely noticeable, a small house with a woman standing outside it, drawn smaller than the other elements, as if she occupied a different scale. "Who's that?" Sophia asked. Valeria looked at the corner figure for a moment, then at her father, who stood in the doorway, then at Sophia. "Nobody," she said. And with the calm decisiveness of a child who has made a choice, she drew 2 clean lines over the figure until it was covered. Then she went back to the boat. Sophia excused herself 10 minutes later. She did not look at Alejandro as she passed him in the doorway. She did not need to. She could feel the specific quality of his silence, the silence of someone who had just heard his 8-year-old daughter say something that rearranged something fundamental, and who was keeping entirely still while it rearranged. In the elevator going down, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Pre-trip onset, left hemisphere, progressive pattern, consistent with accumulation." She wrote, "She knows something." She decided not to show it. She stared at what she'd written. Then, below it, in the careful, controlled script of someone trained once to precision, access, opportunity, timeline. The elevator doors opened. She did not erase any of it. She spent her lunch break on the phone with a former colleague, not a conversation she had planned, but the notebook had made the call feel necessary. Andres was a toxicologist who worked now in Monterey, and who had not asked for an explanation in several years regarding why Sophia asked the questions she asked. He answered anyway, because they had known each other in a previous version of both their lives, and because some friendships survive the demolition of the structures that built them. Hypothetically, she said. Of course, he said. Chronic low-level organophosphate exposure in a child, cyclic symptom presentation, approximately 80 to 90 days of exposure, possibly longer, headache as primary presenting symptom. A pause on the line. Hypothetically, that's a very specific hypothetical. Hypothetically, the cycling would suggest intermittent exposure rather than constant, Andres said, which would mean the vector of exposure was variable, not ambient, something with variable contact, food or liquid most likely, specific foods, specific drinks. Another pause. That's a very particular kind of exposure, Sophia. Yes. That kind of exposure doesn't happen accidentally. No. A longer silence. Are you still a receptionist? Yes. The kind of receptionist who asks toxicology questions? It would seem so. Sophia. His voice changed. Be careful. The last time you were right about something like this, it cost you everything. She looked at the wall of the break room. The potted plant someone had placed there and stopped watering, the motivational poster in both Spanish and English that no one had read in months. I know, she said, and you're going to do it anyway. I'm going to make sure a child gets the right test ordered, she said. That's all. She could hear him deciding whether to believe that. Call me if you need me, he said finally, and hung up. Sophia sat for a moment with the silent phone in her hand. Then she picked up her notebook and went back to work. By the second morning, Alejandro Reyes had developed what Sophia could only describe, to herself and in private, as a campaign. It started with coffee. Not the vending machine variety that formed the cafeteria's main argument against human comfort. Real coffee, from the cafe across the street, brought in a sealed cup with a sleeve and a lid, placed on her desk at 7:28, with a handwritten note on the back of a hospital form that read, "For the receptionist who isn't one." She drank the coffee. She put the note through the shredder. She told herself this was a professional decision. By 8:45, he was leaning against the nurse's station counter with the relaxed ease of someone who had decided space belonged to him, regardless of whether it technically did, asking her about the neurological department's consultation schedule in a tone of voice that was clearly not entirely about consultation schedules. "Doctor Morales is the department head," she said, without looking up from the intake matrix she was processing. "He's currently on sabbatical, but Dr. Gutierrez is covering and has excellent—" "I don't want a standard consultation." He lowered his voice, though the corridor was empty of anyone in relevant earshot. "I want to speak with someone who will actually look at the complete picture, instead of confirming that everything is fine when clearly everything is not fine. Dr. Fuentes is thorough and she is improving. I asked him about the acetylcholinesterase reading this morning." His voice dropped another register. "He said it was a minor indicator within normal parameters, and that I shouldn't be alarmed by secondary markers in the context of extreme physical stress." Sophia typed, "That is a medically reasonable response. Is it the right response?" She looked up. He was watching her with an expression that was, she noted, significantly less arrogant than it had been 48 hours ago. Or rather, the arrogance was present, but turned down, the way volume gets turned down rather than off, and underneath it was something that had been there the whole time, but only now had space to surface. Intelligence operating under genuine duress. "I'm a receptionist," she said. "It's not my position to evaluate the attending's clinical reasoning." "Then speak to me off the record." "There is no off the record. There's my job, and there's everything else." He studied her for a moment. Then, with a slight change of approach that told her he was a person who adapted rather than pressed. "You're originally from Mexico City?" "Guadalajara," she said. "University?" She typed faster. "I don't see how that's relevant to the consultation schedule." "It isn't. A beat. I'm asking because you interest me." "Aday!" Patients' families often develop misplaced attachments to hospital staff during stressful episodes, she said pleasantly. It's well documented. A brief exhale, not quite a laugh, but the structure of one. Are you always this difficult? Are you always this persistent? Only when something matters. He pushed away from the counter. I have a 2 o'clock meeting with Dr. Fuentes to review the neurological observation protocol. I'd like administrative liaison present. That's not a legitimate protocol function. I'll put in a formal request. He was already walking toward the elevator. I believe the form is in the 3rd drawer of the admissions desk. She stared at his retreating back. He had not turned around. She could see from the set of his shoulders that he knew precisely the expression on her face and had decided to treat it as a favorable outcome. She went to the 2 o'clock meeting. She told herself it was because the administrative liaison argument was marginally defensible. The meeting with Dr. Fuentes lasted 40 minutes and was, on the surface, entirely satisfactory. Valeria's vitals were stabilizing. Her appetite had returned, cautiously, in small portions, but consistently. The neurological observation protocol was standard and appropriate. Dr. Fuentes reviewed each element with the thorough patience of a physician who respected his patients' families enough to explain rather than summarize. Sophia sat in the corner and took notes that were, strictly speaking, unnecessary, and watched Alejandro ask questions. He was, she noted, exceptionally good at this. He asked precisely enough to get information without triggering defensiveness. He had clearly been in rooms where information was currency and had learned to acquire it without looking acquisitive. He asked about the acetylcholinesterase. Casually, embedded in a longer question about baseline markers, Dr. Fuentes explained it competently. Within range, stress-related suppression, expected recovery with nutritional support. His confidence was not false. It was the confidence of a good physician who had no reason to look further because nothing in his clinical framework pointed in the direction Sophia's did. Sophia wrote in her notebook, "He's right based on available data." The available data is incomplete. After the meeting in the corridor, when Alejandro fell into step beside her and said, "He says she'll make a full recovery," she said very quietly, "Ask him to run a comprehensive heavy metal and organophosphate-specific panel, not the standard tox screen, a targeted panel. Tell him you want it for your own peace of mind. He'll order it if you ask. He's a good doctor who responds to information when it's put in front of him." Alejandro stopped walking. "What will it show?" "Possibly nothing," she said. "Possibly something that changes every question you need to ask. About the trip. About the period before the trip." She held his gaze in the empty corridor with the windows at the end throwing afternoon light across the tile. "About who had regular access to her in the 6 weeks preceding your departure." The silence between them had a specific weight now, not uncomfortable. The weight of two people standing at the edge of something large and looking at it together without yet deciding to step off. "I'm going to ask you again," he said. "Who are you?" Don't say receptionist." His voice was not unkind. "I've been a CEO for 12 years. I have spoken to approximately 800 receptionists. You are doing something in this building that has nothing to do with the job description." She looked at him for a long moment. He was closer than she'd noticed. She had stopped noticing when people moved into her personal space since it happened so rarely. The bubble around a person in a hospital uniform was generally quite effective, and this close, in the afternoon light, she could see things the emergency lighting of the first night had obscured. Lines at the corners of his eyes from something other than age. The specific set of a jaw that had decided to be okay with things it was not okay with, and had been maintaining that decision for a very long time. She said, "There's a man in Monterey who would tell you I am nobody important." "Who is he?" "The director of the hospital where I used to work." A pause. "Where I used to do something other than answer phones." He was very still. "What happened?" "It's a long story. I have time." "I don't," she said, "not here." She stepped back. The small, deliberate re-establishment of professional distance. Ask for the panel. I'll look at the results when they come in. She turned. Behind her she heard him say, "You said used to do something other than answer phones. Not couldn't find other work. Used to. A beat. There's a difference." She stopped, did not turn. "There is," she agreed. "Sophia." And this time, there was something in her name that was not clinical or tactical, something that arrived sideways and unexpected, in the voice of a man who had spent 3 months alone with his daughter and the sea, and had come out of it with a different relationship to pretense. "Thank you for all of it. For last night, and for this morning, and for—" a pause. "For talking to her about the color the sea turns at 5 in the morning. Something moved in Sophia's chest that she was not prepared for. Not the grand movement of it, the small one. The way a window shifts in wind, that isn't strong enough to open it, just enough to let you know wind is there. "She's a lovely child," she said. "She deserves answers." She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. She stared at the closed doors. She had been very disciplined about not feeling the specific thing she was currently feeling. She had been disciplined about it for 4 years, and the discipline had held, and she had been almost satisfied with the holding. The elevator doors opened. Camila Villanueva stepped out. She was beautiful in the way of someone who had decided beauty was a language and had mastered it entirely. Dark hair blown dry to perfection at an hour when most people were still wearing yesterday's makeup, a silk blouse in cream, heels that were a formal argument against practical footwear, sunglasses pushed up into her hair as a crown. She carried a bag that announced its value without needing to announce anything. She walked 3 steps off the elevator and stopped when she saw Alejandro. The smile that moved across her face was warm and immediate and had, Sophia noted with the precision of someone who had spent years learning to read rooms, a quality of prior preparation to it. "Alejandro." She crossed the corridor to him and placed her hand on his arm, with the naturalness of long habit. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. The car service was confused about which entrance." She turned slightly, including and dismissing Sophia in the same half-degree of movement. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize he was with someone." "Sophia works here," Alejandro said. "She's been—" "Of course." Camilla's smile reached Sophia and completed itself and moved on, the kind of smile that boxes you into a category and closes the lid. "Thank you so much for taking care of them. The hospital has been wonderful, everyone has said so." Her attention returned to Alejandro with the completeness of a door closing. "I need to speak with you. There are insurance questions, and Rodrigo has been calling about the board situation since—" "Camila." Soft, firm. "Since the news broke, and people need to hear from you directly that you're—" "Camila." His voice dropped half a register and she stopped. He looked at her with the specific quality of attention of someone making an internal assessment that had been deferred and could no longer be deferred. "I'll be upstairs in a few minutes." Camilla recalibrated. The smile shifted by 2 degrees in the direction of warmth and 2 more in the direction of something that was not warmth at all. She looked at Sophia once more, the look of someone taking a measurement. She found whatever she was looking for. She said, "Take your time," and walked toward the elevator. The corridor was quiet. Alejandro turned back to Sophia. "That's Camila," he said. He stopped. "It's complicated." "Most things are," Sophia said. She was watching the elevator doors close with an expression she was keeping carefully neutral. "Ask for the panel." "Sophia." She paused. "Are you afraid of her?" Why? She thought about this honestly for a moment, the way she had trained herself to think about things that deserved honesty rather than performance. "I'm not afraid of her," she said. "I'm cautious around certain kinds of people." "What kind is she?" Sophia considered the smile that had measured and filed her, the hand on his arm like a property marker, the warmth with the temperature of a calculation underneath it. "The kind," she said carefully, "who makes sure they know all the variables before anyone else knows the variables exist." She went down the stairs. It was 3 flights. She walked all 3 without stopping, which she had not done since early in her employment at the hospital, and by the time she reached the lobby, the specific quality of alertness that had been Camila Villanueva's gift to her afternoon had sharpened into something she knew how to use. The call came at 10:47 that night. She had been at her kitchen table for 2 hours, notebook open, the Cancun night outside her window carrying the sound of the sea that never entirely left this city. And she had been thinking about the panel results that would come back tomorrow, and the specific thing they would or would not show, and what it would cost to show it to someone who needed to know. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it. The voice was warm, professional, the specific warmth of someone who had practiced the warmth until it became structural, load-bearing, impossible to distinguish from the real thing at normal conversational distance. "Sofia Mendoza," Camila Villanueva said. "I hope I'm not calling too late." Sofia was silent for a moment. "How did you get this number?" "The hospital directory. I have a relationship with several board members." A pause that was not empty. "I wanted to call personally because I think directness is important between women. You've been very kind to Alejandro and Valeria during an incredibly difficult time. That means a great deal to me. I'm glad I could help," Sofia said. "Of course, the thing is..." The warmth shifted, not away, deeper. The warmth of someone pressing a bruise to see if it hurts. Alejandro is not a simple person. He's been through an enormous trauma. He forms attachments quickly in high-stress environments, and they rarely mean what they seem to mean in the moment. The people who care about him have learned to protect him from those situations. "That's a very considerate way to see it," Sofia said. "We do what we can." A breath. "I also wanted to mention, completely separately, that I happened to speak with Dr. Vargas at Hospital Santa Elena in Guadalajara at a charity function last month. He mentioned your name, said you were brilliant, but that the situation there had been very difficult, very public. The warmth was at its highest setting now. Small world." Sofia said nothing. "I only bring it up because the last thing Alejandro needs right now is additional complications," Camila said. "And I imagine the last thing you need is..." Another pause that contained an entire vocabulary. "Renewed attention on something that was already settled." "I appreciate the call," Sofia said. "Of course. Sleep well." And the line went silent. Sofia sat at her kitchen table for a very long time. Outside, the sea continued its indifferent conversation with the shore. The notebook was open in front of her. She picked up her pen. She wrote, "She knows who I am." She wrote, "She called before the panel results are back. Before I've said anything to anyone." She wrote and pressed the pen into the paper with the controlled precision of someone who has been here before, who has stood at the edge of this particular choice before and paid the price of it before, and who is, for reasons she cannot entirely justify, about to make the same choice again. She called because she is afraid of what the panel will show. She stared at the words. Then she closed the notebook, set her alarm, and went to bed. She did not sleep, but she had made her decision, and the thing about decisions made clearly and in full knowledge of their cost is that they require very little maintenance once made. You simply carry them forward, one step at a time, into whatever comes next. Whatever came next, Sofia was ready. She was terribly, stubbornly, professionally ready. The panel results came back at 9:14 on a Thursday morning, and Sofia was not supposed to see them. She saw them anyway. Not through any breach of protocol. She was in the system on legitimate business, updating the insurance coordination file Dr. Fuentes had flagged for administrative review, and the flag on Valeria Reyes's file appeared in the corner of her screen with the quiet patience of something that had been waiting. She clicked it. She read it. She sat very still for approximately 40 seconds. Then she printed it, folded it, and put it in the inside pocket of her jacket next to her notebook. The organophosphate-specific panel showed a pattern that a trained toxicologist would have recognized immediately. The specific compound, chlorpyrifos, agricultural grade. The concentration curve in Valeria's blood work suggested accumulation over 8 to 12 weeks, with onset consistent with approximately 6 weeks before the departure date of the yacht. 6 weeks before departure. The yacht trip that was supposed to last 10 days. That had sunk 40 kilometers off Isla Mujeres in a storm that, according to the meteorological records Sophia had looked up at 2 in the morning on her phone, had been clearly forecast 5 days in advance. She was on her lunch break at the bench outside the hospital's eastern entrance, where bougainvillea grew up through a trellis and provided half an hour of imperfect privacy, when Alejandro appeared at the end of the path. She had not called him. He walked toward her with the focused energy of someone who had recently received information and was still calibrating what to do with it. "Fuentes called me," he said. He sat beside her without asking. He said the panel showed a compound, an agricultural chemical. He's notified the pediatric specialist and updated the treatment protocol. He paused. He seems confident it was environmental, a contaminated water source on the island. "That's possible," Sophia said. "Is it what you think happened?" She opened her notebook to the page from the night before, turned it so he could read it, and handed it to him without speaking. He read. She watched his face. He had good control of it, the control of a man who had spent years in boardrooms, where the first person to show what they were thinking lost something. But the control had a cost she could see in the quality of the stillness of something stopped rather than resting. 6 weeks before we sailed, he said. The accumulation pattern is consistent with that window. Valeria was living at home. She ate every meal with me or with... He stopped. Regular contact, Sophia said. Someone with access to what she ate and drank. Someone whose presence in her life would not have raised questions. He turned the page and saw what she'd written underneath. She knew. She decided not to show it. The figure in the corner of the drawing. "The woman Valeria covered up," he said. "I don't know who it was. I only know what she showed me without showing me." She took the notebook back. The yacht. His jaw worked. Mechanical failure. Coast Guard determined the storm was forecast 5 days in advance. Anyone who planned to be on the yacht and then chose not to be, with enough notice, would have known the window. He turned to look at her. His eyes had the flat, specific quality of someone not yet angry, because they are still on the other side of the wall from the full measure of what they are about to feel. "You think someone tried to kill us? I think the evidence points towards someone who had access to your daughter for several weeks before your departure, who knew your schedule, and who made certain they would not be on the boat when it went down." She kept her voice level, evidence-based. "I think that person called me 2 nights ago." A silence so complete she could hear the traffic on the boulevard 2 blocks away. "Camilla." The word arrived without interrogation, not a question. The specific flatness of a fact in transit, too long. "She called me. She mentioned Dr. Vargas in Guadalajara. She mentioned that Valeria didn't need complications." Sophia kept her eyes forward. "She was warning me away before the results came in, before anyone knew what the panel would show. She knew what the panel would show because she knew what was in it." His voice had descended to a register she had not heard from him, lower and more controlled than the emergency, than the cafeteria, than all the careful days between. The voice of someone who has finally located the true size of a betrayal and is still standing. "How long have you known this?" "I didn't know. I suspected. There's a significant difference, and I was not willing to say it out loud until the panel confirmed the compound." He stood. He walked 3 steps away, stopped, stood with his back to her and his hands at his sides. After a moment he said quietly, "We were together for 2 years. I was going to ask her to marry me. I had the ring." A pause. Valeria adored her. Sophia said nothing. Some things required the space of silence around them. She was at the apartment 3 times a week. She made her breakfast. She helped with her homework. His voice stayed level with audible effort. "She was in my daughter's life for 2 years and she poisoned her." "I know." He turned back. His face had resolved into something she had not seen on it before. Not anger, not grief, but the concentrated calm of a person who has passed through feeling into deciding. "What do I need to do?" "Get a criminal attorney, not corporate. Someone who handles forensic evidence cases. Don't confront Camilla. Don't call her. Don't let her know the results have been reviewed. She stood. She called me because she thought a threat would be enough. She doesn't know it wasn't. Sophia. He stepped toward her. You could have walked away from this. She gave you a specific reason to walk away. Why didn't you? Because your daughter asked me a question and I knew the answer, she said. I've never learned to leave a question unanswered when I know the answer. It's a professional defect. Something moved across his face, the beginning of something shaped like relief. You said you were nobody important, not anymore. That was accurate information. It wasn't. He was close enough now that she could see in the afternoon light through the bougainvillea the quality of his attention. Not the assessment of the first night, not the tactical calculation of corridors. Something that had stopped calculating. Tell me what happened in Guadalajara. The bougainvillea shifted. Salt air moved through it from the sea. She had held this story close for 4 years, with the practiced grip of someone who learned that certain truths are only safe when contained. She opened her mouth to deflect. The reflex was automatic, well maintained, and found, to her own surprise, that the deflection did not arrive. Later, she said instead. When this is over. Promise me later. Alejandro, promise me. Not demanding. The voice of a man who has lost 96 days and a 2-year relationship, and nearly his daughter, asking for the small anchoring thing of a word kept. Later, she said, I promise. His hand moved, barely the smallest beginning of a gesture toward her face, arrested before it completed. The arrest was its own kind of arrival. She felt it in the space between them. Get your lawyer, she said. I'll document everything I have. She went back inside, stood in the lobby's cool air with her back against the wall. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You were warned. What happens next is your choice. She photographed it, added it to the folder she had been quietly building since Camilla's call, sent a copy to Andres in Monterrey. Then she put her phone in her pocket, walked to the desk, and answered the next intake call with the steady voice of a woman who was, officially and entirely, a receptionist, and who had, in the preceding hour, set something irreversible in motion. She did not look back toward the bench. She didn't need to. The following 72 hours moved with the quality of weather about to break. Sophia moved through her shifts with calibrated normalcy, while the folder on her phone grew one document at a time. Camilla appeared twice at the hospital, carrying flowers, speaking warmly to the nursing staff, touching Alejandro's arm with the easy proprietary manner of someone long accustomed to considering herself in possession of what she touched. Each time she passed the desk, she gave Sophia the kind of look that measured and filed, without acknowledging it was measuring anything. She had made her decision in full knowledge of its cost, and that kind of decision requires very little maintenance. You carry it forward, one step at a time, into whatever comes next. On the second visit, she stopped at the desk. You're still here, she said. I work here, Sophia said pleasantly. I thought my message was clear. Camilla's voice had dropped. The warmth was gone. Underneath it was something clean and utterly unsentimental. What did I miss? Sophia met her gaze. Nothing. Have a good afternoon. Camilla stood one moment longer, reading Sophia's face for information that wasn't there. Then she walked to the elevator. A lawyer named Licenciado Torres arrived at the hospital the following morning at 7. He was 60, grey-suited, with the posture of a man who had spent decades in rooms where very serious things were decided. He and Alejandro went into a conference room and did not come out for 3 hours. When the federal ministerial police arrived through the sliding glass entrance doors, showed their badges, and asked for the administrator on duty, Sophia stood up from her desk. I can help you, she said. I have documentation you'll want to see. The police did not arrest Camila Villanueva that day. That was not how it worked, as Licenciado Torres explained in the conference room while Sophia sat in the corner with her folder spread on the table, and the federal officers conducted their preliminary review with the careful pace of people who understood that a case built quickly was a case built to collapse. What happened was that evidence was received, logged, reviewed by people whose job was exactly this, the chemical analysis. Sophia's observations documented from the first night, the phone records Torres had already begun pursuing. the text message. It was, Torres said, an excellent beginning. Sophia gave her documentation, answered questions in the direct and precise language of someone trained to give testimony, then stood and said she needed to return to her desk. Alejandro followed her into the hallway. "You told the police you were a former licensed physician," he said. She looked at the wall. "The officer asked about your qualifications for recognizing the marker. You said, 'I am a former licensed physician, currently employed in an administrative capacity.'" A pause. "You've been here 11 months, as a receptionist." "That's correct. You promised me Guadalajara." The corridor was empty. The building made its ambient sounds, distant monitors, the soft pneumatic thud of a door, the fluorescent indifference overhead. She had promised him. And Sofia Mendoza, whatever else had been stripped from her life, kept the things she promised. "I was a resident at Hospital Santa Elena," she said, "completing my 3rd year, pediatric neurology." She said it without expression, reading from a page. "I noticed a pattern in 3 patients over 6 weeks, children under 10, presenting with acute neurological symptoms, each diagnosed with viral encephalitis, standard of care. But the symptom clustering was wrong, the progression was wrong. The shared demographics pointed toward a common environmental exposure rather than 3 separate viral events." She had said these words before in other rooms. They had not gotten easier. "I documented it. I brought it to Dr. Vargas, the department head." "What did he do?" "He told me I was a 3rd-year resident who did not yet have the experience to override attending physicians' diagnoses." A pause. He was not wrong about the experience. "I was 26. "What happened to the children?" she breathed. "The first 2 recovered after extended intensive treatment. The pattern changed as the exposure was eventually removed, not because anyone identified the source. Coincidence. The 3rd child." She stopped. Alejandra was very still. "She was 4 years old," Sophia said. "She died from secondary complications 8 weeks into her hospitalization. Complications consistent with the misdiagnosed underlying cause." "And you went back to Vargas?" "I went back to Vargas. I went to the hospital board. I filed a formal complaint with the State Medical Review Commission." She kept her voice flat, the voice of a medical record. "And the investigation found that I had documented my concerns in patient files in ways that violated privacy protocol, that I had shared case information with an outside consultant without attending physician authorization, that I had acted outside my residency scope in ways constituting professional misconduct. They turned it back on you. They turned it back on me." She met his gaze steadily. "My license was suspended pending review. The review is still pending. It has been pending for 4 years. A beat. I left Guadalajara. I came here. I took what work I could find." The hallway held them. Somewhere the Cancun afternoon conducted its usual business. "The source of exposure in those 3 children," Alejandro said, "was it ever identified?" "Chlorpyrifos," she said. "Agricultural grade." The word sat between them with the weight of the same word in a different context, read off a different panel, in this same building. "Vargas knew," he said, "not a question. I believe he knew. I could not prove it then. I still cannot." She straightened. "With Valeria I can. The panel, the timeline, the phone records, the message, it was enough to bring the police here today. You recognized it because you'd seen it before." He stepped toward her. "You saved my daughter's life because someone destroyed yours first." Outside, the ordinary business of the hospital continued. Monitors beeped, families waited, nurses changed shifts with the quiet efficiency of people whose competence forms the infrastructure of other people's crises. Sophia had been part of that infrastructure for 11 months. Standing in this corridor with this man, she felt the strange double exposure of 2 versions of herself, the one who had arrived with her license suspended and her trust in other people substantially revised, and the one who had apparently, without planning to, begun to rebuild something she'd stopped expecting. She was not going to cry. She had decided this approximately 4 years ago, and the decision held. "I noticed a pattern," she said carefully. "I'm trained to notice patterns." Sophia. His voice had none of its professional armor left. None of the CEO calibration, the emergency command, the careful management of information. It was simply his voice, with nothing in front of it. "Come here." She went. Not because she was asked, because the specific resistance she'd maintained for 11 months and 4 years before that had run out of reasons to maintain itself. He put his arms around her. She pressed her face against his shoulder for exactly the time required to accept that this was real. Then she breathed, and it was the first breath in a very long time that had nothing to prove. He held her without speaking. The corridor stayed empty. The building continued its ambient life. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. "About the yacht. Camilla organized the trip. She suggested it, booked the crew, the supplies, the route. She was supposed to join us at day 4. She called that morning to say she'd been delayed." He stopped. "She was never delayed. She was never coming." Sophia looked at him. "She arranged a route through a known storm window. She had an alibi in the form of international travel, a beat. The crew, 2 men, both lost." His voice went remote, factual in the way of someone putting armor back on. "They had families. Torres will need the families," Sophia said. "They're part of this. They deserve to be part of this. He's already on it." Alejandro reached up and with extraordinary gentleness moved a strand of hair from her face. His scarred, rebuilt hands were precise and careful, the same way they'd placed Valeria in the wheelchair on the first night. "I need to ask you something. Alejandro, my company has a medical advisory board. The position has been vacant 8 months because I couldn't find the right person." He held her gaze. "The right person notices things that trained doctors miss. She follows evidence into rooms where others have decided not to go. She keeps promises. She asks questions that deserve answers and doesn't flinch." She stared at him. "You're offering me a job. A starting point. The license review. Torres has contacts at the medical commission. Your case is directly connected to the case being prosecuted here. Vargas's name will come up. When it does, the review has different context." Something in her chest shifted. Not quickly, not all at once, but with the specific quality of a thing fixed in place for a long time that has finally identified the direction it is allowed to move. "You don't know that. I know that evidence changes context. And I know that a doctor who identified chlorpyrifos poisoning on day 3 of admission on the basis of a behavioral observation and 1 enzyme marker is someone whose clinical judgment deserves to be in a building more consequential than a reception desk." She looked away, then back. "This is an extraordinarily convenient moment for a job offer." "I know." The corner of his mouth moved, the first approach of a smile she'd seen from him in several days, and its arrival was disproportionately significant. "I'm making it anyway." "I'll think about it," she said. "I'll take it." His hand was still near her face, not touching but near, in the way of someone who has learned to be careful with proximity. "I need you to know that what I feel, what I've been trying not to feel for several days because the timing seemed wrong, it is very wrong timing. I know." He looked at her with the direct, stripped-down honesty of a man who had decided pretense was something he left at sea. "It doesn't change the fact." She was quiet for a moment, the careful, evidence-based quiet of someone examining something from every angle before naming it. "No," she said finally, "none of it is a no." He exhaled. The exhale carried 3 months of sea and 4 years of a life rebuilt from zero, and something that was, against all reasonable probability, the shape of what came next. He took her hand. She let him. Andres called that evening. He had seen Torres's name in the press coverage and done the arithmetic. "You found it again," he said. "Yes," she said. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "And the man?" She didn't answer immediately. Andres, who had known her across 16 years and a considerable rearrangement of her life, went quiet with the quality of someone who's already understood the answer. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "I know," she said. "I will." She meant it. Down the hall, Valeria was drawing the yellow rescue boat, getting better one careful line at a time, waiting for her father with the patient certainty of someone who already knew how the story ended. The Medical Review Commission of Jalisco took 11 weeks to formally reopen Sofia's case. Torres had been characteristically understated about his expectations. The connection is there. We simply need to ensure the right people are aware of it. But the connection, once established, was not subtle. Dr. Vargas at Hospital Santa Elena had received 12 years of research funding from a pharmaceutical manufacturer with direct ties to the agrochemical distributor implicated in the Cancun case. His intervention in Sofia's complaint had delayed the identification of a common exposure vector across 4 regional cases. One child had died. The connection required no judicial creativity. It required only the attention of people who had not previously been paying attention. On the morning, the formal reinstatement letter arrived, not the review, the reinstatement full and unconditional, with a commendation for the clinical observations that had contributed to an active criminal case. Sofia was in the kitchen of an apartment she had recently, and somewhat tentatively, been spending more time in than her own. She was making coffee. Alejandro read the letter over her shoulder and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Dr. Mendoza." "Don't," she said. Her voice was thick without her permission. "Dr. Mendoza," he said again, with the specific quality of someone for whom the word matters precisely because it has been withheld too long. She turned. He was leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, and that expression, the one his face made when something he has maintained control of has been allowed, briefly, to simply be true, unhurried and present. "It's just a letter," she said. "It's not just a letter. There will be hearings and certifications and—" "Sofia." He stepped forward and held the letter alongside her, not taking it away. 2 people standing at the kitchen counter with the Cancun morning light coming in at its learned angle, and the specific silence that was not empty. "Let it be real." She looked at the letter, at his hands, still scarred, still rebuilt in crooked overlapping lines she had noticed the first night, at his face. "It's real," she said, and felt the weight of 4 years begin, carefully and in pieces, to release. The criminal trial of Camila Villanueva opened 8 months after her arrest. Sofia testified on the second day. She spoke for 4 hours in the precise language of a clinician giving evidence, describing enzyme markers and accumulation curves and the specific pattern of a symptom that looked like something it was not. She described day 12, the left temporal headache, the reaching motion of a small right hand at 2 in the morning. She did not look at Camilla during the testimony. She took the stand with the internal posture she had maintained since Guadalajara. Not armor, not performance, but alignment. The way a person aligns when what they're about to say is simply what happened, and they have accepted the cost of saying it. The court was quiet in the way of rooms where something is being decided. She answered each question fully and without decoration. And when she was done, she stepped down and did not look at Camilla, because she had nothing to communicate that wasn't already in the record. She was not looking at Camilla. She was looking at what was true and saying it in the clearest available language, and that was something she had always known how to do. The verdict came after 4 days of deliberation, 3 counts of attempted murder, 2 of criminal negligence resulting in death, the crew of the yacht who had lost their lives in the storm. The crew's families sat in the gallery. When the verdict was read, Sofia looked at them and thought about the specific cost of truth and who pays it and who is owed it. Dr. Vargas entered a separate plea agreement before his own trial began. Torres had been characteristically understated about his confidence in this outcome also. The pharmaceutical funding connection, when aired in full, was not a thing that benefited from the exposure of a trial. Valeria was discharged from Hospital Riviera on a Tuesday, 9 weeks after her admission, with a clean bill of health and specific instructions for follow-up monitoring her new pediatric neurologist considered entirely precautionary. She walked out of the building carrying her sketchbook, wearing a yellow hoodie that matched, she had informed both her father and Sophia with complete conviction, the exact color of the rescue boat. She took Sophia's hand on the left side and her father's on the right, and the three of them walked across the parking lot in the November Cancun morning, warm and salt-scented and entirely ordinary, the kind of morning that does not know it is significant. At the car, Valeria said, "I told the nurses you were going to get married." "Valeria," Alejandro said. They seemed happy about it. She got in the back seat and opened her sketchbook. "I'm reporting what happened." Sophia looked at Alejandro over the roof of the car. He looked back with the expression she had catalogued without meaning to, from the first night's emergency lighting through every corridor and cafeteria and conference room, now settled into something less managed, something that was simply his face, directed at her with nothing in front of it. "Your 8-year-old daughter," Sophia said, "is significantly better at this than you are. She takes after her father," he said. "She takes after no one I've met." He laughed. The first real laugh she'd heard from him, unguarded, arriving without calculation, and the sound of it made the morning larger. He proposed in January on the beach 200 meters from the house, because Sophia went there every day before her shift. He had held the ring for 3 weeks and rejected every architected location his assistant suggested for reasons he found difficult to articulate, except that none of them felt true. She was standing at the water's edge in the particular pre-dawn blue she had once described to Valeria, the color the sea turns at 5 in the morning. He walked down to her and she turned, and he was already standing there, not kneeling, because 12 imagined versions of this moment, and none of them started with kneeling, with the ring in his open hand and his eyes on her face. She looked at the ring, then at him, then at the sea. "Here," she said. "Here," he confirmed. "On a Tuesday." Our Tuesdays seemed underrated. "You're completely—" She stopped herself. "Completely what?" She looked at him with the expression he had learned to read, the one that preceded a smile by approximately 2 seconds, and was, in his private accounting, even better. "Completely unreasonable," she said. "I'm consistent." He looked at her. The pre-dawn light was doing what it did to the water and to her face. "I consistently make coffee correctly now. I consistently lose arguments with your toxicologist friend. I consistently think about the fact that you answered 3 questions at 2 in the morning when you had every reason not to, and called the police before anyone asked, and cried exactly once, 11 seconds, and that every single one of those things is the same thing." She was very still. "What thing?" "Still." "The most specific kind of brave," he said, "the kind that doesn't wait to be recognized." She looked at the ring for a long moment. "Valeria already told the nurses. She told everyone. The hospital gift shop, I believe. Possibly the Coast Guard." The smile arrived, the real one without the 2-second delay, and she took the ring and put it on and looked at it in the pre-dawn light. Her hand, her doctor's hand, her receptionist's hand, the hand that had written day 12 in a margin at 4 in the morning and followed it wherever it led. "Okay," she said, "that's a yes. That's a yes." He put his arms around her on the beach with the sea coming in and the last of the dark going out, and the morning became the color she had tried to describe to a girl who had understood it immediately because she had lived it. The wedding was in April. 40 people on a coastal terrace with flowers Valeria had selected with absolute decisiveness. Valeria stood between them during the ceremony, holding both their hands, having negotiated this arrangement 3 weeks in advance. When Alejandro looked at Sophia during the vows with an attention so complete that Valeria whispered quite audibly, "Papa, you have to keep blinking." The 40 people on the terrace found it collectively charming, and Sophia would remember it more precisely than the vows themselves. Licenciado Torres retired to Oaxaca 2 years later, where he grew chiles and occasionally answered calls from former clients with the patience of a man with no more urgent business. Andres in Monterrey became the toxicology consultant for the medical advisory board Sofia built, and was insufferable about it. The crew members' families received settlements that were not, Torres had noted carefully, the point, but since they were necessary, adequate. Valeria drew the wedding. The proportions were precise. She was that kind of person. In the lower right corner, small but present and uncovered, she drew a house with 3 figures standing outside it in the particular Cancun light, at approximately 5 in the morning, in the exact color the sea turns when the darkness is almost gone and the day has not quite committed to beginning. She did not cover it. She had made her decision 4 years ago, and then again in a corridor, and then again on a beach at 5 in the morning, and the decisions had built between them something she had not planned to build, but that was, she understood, entirely and permanently hers. She looked at it for a moment, decided it was right, and signed her name beneath it with the settled finality of someone who has answered the question she came to answer.